now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. You may be seated. Order. Honorable members, the first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Chief Whip.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker and the members of this House, I move that the House knows the rules of the political office bearers. Pension fund require that after a general election, members of the National Assembly must elect 4 members of the trustees and 4 as alternates to serve in the board of trustees of this fund, provided that 2 trustees and 2 alternate members are members of the majority, and the remaining 2 trustees and 2 alternates are from amongst members of the minority parties. I further note that from the majority party, we have received the name of Honorable M.G. Buroto, Honorable J.M. Mufukeng, Honorable I.K. Murolong, Honorable H. Mohammed as alternate members. Further nominees from the minority parties, Dr. D.T. George, Dr. Mulder, Dr. Sugars, and Dr. Sin as alternate members. I so move, Honorable Chair.
I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. Good start. The Secretary will read the first order.
Debate on 16 days of activism for non-violence against women and children. Enough is enough, 365 days to end gender-based violence.
Honorable Mrwetyana.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honorable members, the debate on the 16 days of activism against violence on women and children follows the official launch of this campaign by the President few days ago in Lephalale, Limpopo. During this launch, the President alluded to the fact that the crisis of violence against women and children is a great shame on our nation. It goes against our African values and everything we stand for as a people. We grew up knowing that men and boys respect women and protect children. Boys and women were taught to never ever raise their hand against a woman, but that way seems to have been lost by some men in our society. Again, this debate comes at the heels of the joint sitting called by the President in September, following what he referred to as a very violent and brutal war, which is underway against the women of South Africa. The President further outlined that government has developed emergency action plan to address the crisis of gender-based violence. He outlined the 5 principal areas as measures to strengthen the existing interventions, as well as introducing new measures. Among these measures is to improve the economic power of women in South Africa. Our participation in this debate will be following on the issue of women empowerment as one of the measures advanced by our government to bring about gender equality and participation in the economy. Our belief is that subjugation of women is rooted in socio-economic design in our societies. Therefore, if we are to fully ensure that women occupy their rightful place in society, at the center of that must be the economic empowerment of women. The African National Congress has led South Africa in ensuring that the empowerment of women is brought to the center of development. Therefore, women should be in the forefront and play an important role, actively participate in influencing decisions and direction on women economic empowerment and radical socio-economic transformation of South Africa's inclusive economy. This assertion is in line with the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Ms. Gina, who once said that as women, we need to take cognizance of our capabilities and positively contribute in building an inclusive economy for our country, close quote. This assertion clearly demonstrates the need to mobilize and organize women for economic empowerment, as women equality and socio-economic independence are the most for domestic development and growth and a vital part of sustainable development and democracy. However, the transformation of our economy has not been at the pace required to serve all our people. Unemployment remains high. The country has high levels of income inequality. In addition, the recent studies conducted by the BBBEE Commission for 2017 and 18 show that black women still occupy less managerial or executive positions compared to males and white people on the boards of entities listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, standing at 18% in 2017 and 21.63% in 2018, despite women being the majority in this country. Further, in terms of ownership, black women were sitting at 9% in 2017 and 10.1% in 2018, which remains low considering the demographics. However, honorable members, even though the economic transformation remains sluggish, the African National Congress government has made great strides in empowering women, and as such, since the advent of democracy, the ANC government has made great improvement in changing the lives of women by implementing policies and programs that support women economic and social development. As such, currently women comprise 58% of all students enrolled in universities and colleges around the country. 47% of MPs are women. And the ANC government has achieved 50-50 gender parity among cabinet ministers for the first time. However, notwithstanding the successes outlined above, there are still barriers to overcome and ensure women empowerment, such as the most key barriers that hinders women empowerment, such as is the lack of access of funding for small and medium-sized business, mainly those led by black women in general, and African in particular, youth and persons with disabilities, skills development and business training, problem of accessing markets for emerging companies, displacement of local, in particular, township enterprises by big retail businesses, access to land by rural, informal and urban communities. Thus, the African National Congress has a plan which seeks to eradicate barriers that hinders women economic empowerment, which its government is committed to accelerate and implement at a faster pace, resolute to mobilize, unite women of our country and South Africans in general around the common challenges facing women in South Africa, especially persistent realities of unemployment, poverty and inequality, which impacts more on African rural women than their men counterpart. This is alluded in the January 8th Testament of 2019. The African National Congress is forging ahead with plans to bring about a more inclusive economy, which will draw more women, more rural people and more youth into the economy through programs that extend ownership to workers, through expanded access to digital skills, training to young people by developing and supporting technological and digital startups, and more concerted focus on SMMEs, cooperatives, and township and village enterprise. Transforming the economy to empower women. The African National Congress is of the view that the empowerment of women remains an important part of our employment equity and broad-based black economic empowerment policies. And therefore, by working together with its social partners, we can be able to restore our economy and create economic opportunities, especially for our women and youth. And as such, the ANC government has set aside in the coming financial year 124 million from the Social Relief of Distress Program in order to buy goods and services from women and for women and youth-owned cooperatives and small businesses. Over the last 4 years, the state-owned companies have spent a total of 100 billion on goods and services from women-owned businesses. And in the last year, state-owned companies has enrolled over 2,700 female students in training programs to become artisans, technicians, and engineers. And the ANC government is committed to expand its work in special economic zones by having specific programs to support women's participation across the value chain and bring more women into Black Industrialist Program. A program, although only 5 years old, has already surpassed its 5-year target for women entrepreneurs. It has approved the 6.7 billion for women-owned businesses against a target of 4.4 billion. Our government has a scale-up small business support measures, including access to funding and set up incubation centers in townships and rural areas, facilitated access to markets for small businesses, cooperatives and township and village enterprises. At least 30% government procurement spent will be allocated to goods and services from these enterprises. Government will help grow small enterprises, cooperatives and township and village creation and innovation, and encourage all forms of entrepreneurship. One area in which the African National Congress have a greatest impact on improving the lives of women, especially rural women, is in access to and the ownership of land. The ANC must confront the issue that women are being denied the right to own land in the name of culture and tradition. And the ANC therefore encourages women take note of opportunities that its government is availing to grow the inclusive economy to benefit all the people of South Africa.
Okay.
The ANC calls upon women to participate in black
I think your
industry.
time has expired. Thank you.
Balibongwe, I thank you, Chair.
Honorable Sharif.
South African women and children live a life riddled with fear, anxiety, and a lack of opportunity. It is literally rough in these streets. If we take anything away from 2019, let it be to ensure that we keep up the same energy towards gender-based violence and femicide every day, 365 days through the years until we see change in our society. Change, of course, doesn't happen by chance or by hoping really hard. No, change happens when the environment, the timing, the voices of survivors and activists, and the political will come together to dismantle an establishment. The system of
Honorable
patriarchy...
members, your noise levels are high. Your conversation is high. Can you lower it, please, so that we hear the one on the podium and not you in your seats. Go ahead, Honourable Member.
The system of patriarchy is an establishment that thrives in an environment of no accountability, no justice, no service delivery, entrenched patronage, and a complete lack of will, especially when this happens at a government level. It's been 1 year and 1 month since the presidential summit against gender-based violence and femicide took place. The signing of this declaration must never be seen as a victory of government. It is a victory for the people who fight the status quo and take on the failing establishment because they genuinely believe in equality and justice. But all this means nothing because government has still not come to the table, yet they have RSVP'd. Today, we must put an end to the ANC government flaunting and parading as they claim false victories. They must be held accountable. But most importantly, we and they must hold each other accountable. Government's role...
Order, members.
Government's role is to come here and tell us what the implementation plan is. Where is the money coming from? And what are the timelines? Nothing else. We are tired of hearing rhetoric and words that mean nothing. The president said 1.6...
Honourable members, you can't all want to respond at the same time. Allow the member to finish anyway. You will have your chance to respond on the podium. Please don't make... You're out of order. How do you do that? I mean, really? No. Go ahead, Honourable Member.
Thank you. The president said 1.6 billion rand will be allocated to the Emergency Response Action Plan. But what he didn't tell us is that this is not new money. This is money that will need to come from the good graces of departmental heads and is not deliberately rig-fenced for gender-based violence and femicide. You don't have to look far for signs of this. Treasury has said 1.4 billion of the 1.6 billion rand is already allocated in the budget. So this is not something new that happened magically in September after the president sold the nation dreams. The truth is, there is not 1.6 billion rand in the adjustment budgets of all departments that are geared towards the emergency action plan. What does this say? To me, it says that government is grasping at straws when it comes to resourcing interventions, implementing interventions across all departments, and monitoring and evaluating the outcomes of these interventions. This is not happening. If government cannot in the least commit resources or put together a coordinating effort to combat gender-based violence and femicide, then you best believe, South Africa, that they cannot implement any interventions. And that forfeits their right to stand here at this podium and speak about the fight against gender-based violence and femicide.
Your time has expired.
I thank you.
Honourable Yako.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, it was the psychiatrist from Martinique, Frans Fanon, who, upon examining the conditions under which people lived, boldly proclaimed, "When we revolt, it is not for a particular culture. We revolt simply because, for many reasons, we can no longer breathe." There are 52,420 reported reasons why South African women feel they cannot breathe, and that perhaps the only avenue left for us is to revolt, by any means possible. There are a number of reported sexual assault cases for the previous financial year. Thousands more cases of rape, assault, harassment of women have never been reported because our criminal justice system is not friendly to abused women and children. In each of these thousands of cases is a tragic story of lives cut short, of confidence destroyed, of dreams deferred, of hopes shattered, of love altered, and ultimately of lives transformed forever. These heinous acts of inhumanity against women and girls affect not only direct victims, but also their loved ones forever. The families of Precious Ramabulana, of Uyinene Mrwetyana, of Anine Boysens, of Aviwe Velem, of hundreds of thousands of more women who are raped and killed will also be scarred for life. Deputy Speaker, we are fiddling while the country is burning. We are engaged in endless talks while there is no guarantee that I will arrive at home unharmed tonight. While there is no guarantee that the young toddler at creche will not be raped and killed the next hour. While we don't know if the woman in the office next door is forced to perform sexual acts for favors in order to keep her jobs. The state has been rendered powerless, and as women, we indeed can no longer breathe in this society. Women have suffered the most from the neoliberal reality of the past 20 years under the ANC rule. The vicious circle of triple oppression based on race, class, and gender has not been broken for Black women in particular. We recognize that while patriarchy and sexism are pervasive in our society, it is Black women who suffer the most from gender-based violence. It is Black women who wake up in the wee hours of the morning, leaving their young kids to look after themselves while they go and try and eke out a living in the homes of white people. It is Black women who stay in the ghettos, face head-on the reality and the daily stench of our rotten society, which makes it okay for people to live with rats, with fleas, and with human beings who have been transformed into beasts. It is Black women whose professional accomplishments and skills tend to mean very little in their political parties and their respective working environment because men have appropriated themselves the right to dictate the fate of women. It is Black women who endure the most pain, the most atrocious rapes, and most violence. It is for these women that I speak. Up to now, interventions for dealing with violence against women have been superficial. They've been half-hearted, they've been based on the wrong understanding of the root causes of the vulnerability of women. This is so because we refuse to acknowledge that gender-based violence and related antisocial activities are reinforced, even sustained by the deplorable general conditions of our people. Therefore, a key to female emancipation is de-emancipation for all. We must emphasize that transforming the lives of our people in the ghettos from one of the general structural violence as the mechanism to end of all violence, including violence against women. Our criminal justice system must not only be seen to be working when victims are from more affluent homes and families. The police in townships and villages must be empowered to do their jobs thoroughly, out of the glare of the media. Our courts let us down every so often. Thousands of women live in the same streets and face their tormentors every day because they get released so soon after cases have been reported. Every day must be a day of activism against gender-based violence. I repeat, every day must be a day of activism against gender-based violence. But as women, we can no longer depend on the state as an enforcer of our rights because maybe we need a new women's front to think and fight against the abuse of women. We can no longer be expected to act normal in a very abnormal society. And as we approach the festive season, I would like to call upon all fighters to be crusaders against the abuse of women everywhere they go. I thank you.
Honourable van der Merwe.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, before the end of today's debate, a woman will be a victim of gender-based violence. She will go to a police station, possibly one where there will be no rape kits available. She might even encounter a police officer that will tell her to go home and work out her problems there. She will seek refuge at a hospital where she will be told that she has brought this shame upon herself. Because of the crumbling healthcare system, she will not get the care she needs and she'll possibly contract HIV. Because shelters go underfunded and receive minimum support from government, she'll have no place to go. At the Tutuzela Care Centre, she'll probably find no counselling services. She'll be left to fend for herself, and so the cycle of abuse will continue. She may very well become yet another statistic, yet another casualty of South Africa's broken system that is meant to protect the most vulnerable. Deputy Speaker, some 1,000 children were murdered in the last financial year, and as many as 500 died as a result of abuse and neglect. 41% of people raped in South Africa are children, 41%. South Africa's femicide rate is 5 times higher than the global average, and in the past financial year, the murder of women increased by 11%. This frightening reality should keep us all up at night. But we don't need reminding of the statistics. We know South Africa is a war zone, and we know that our government is losing the war against violent crime. Speaker, just a few weeks ago, on the 18th of September 2019, we stood at this very podium during a historic joint sitting on gender-based violence. President Ramaphosa responded to the cries of the many who were taken to the streets to say enough is enough, following Uyinene's death. We remembered her and the many we had lost. We pledged then that things must change, but sadly, change didn't come fast enough for Precious Ramabulana. Today, many speakers will remember her. Precious died after being stabbed 52 times by a man that already had a pending rape case against him. Precious died trying to reach the police, but neither she nor her aunt nor her friend could reach them. Precious was failed by the very system that was meant to protect her, failed by SAPS that was meant to protect and serve. Deputy Speaker, it is clear that government's new plan of action to fight gender-based violence and the resources that have been allocated to it, as laudable as it might be, is not going to help us win this war if SAPS is simply hapless in the fight against rampant crime. So the South African Council for Social Services Professions say that more than 6,000 social workers remain unemployed. It goes without saying that we are not going to win this war if social workers are sitting at home when their critical skills are needed at police stations, at shelters, at hospitals, and at schools. We're not going to win this war when not a single South African is aware of government's toll-free number, toll-free gender-based violence call center. And we're not going to win this war when restraining orders go unenforced and when NGOs that provide vital services on behalf of the state remain underfunded. And we are simply not going to win this war when ANC ministers and their departments are not held to account for their failures to protect the most vulnerable. To this end, the IFP believes that a new standalone Parliamentary Oversight Committee to oversee the new National Strategic Plan to fight gender-based violence is needed. Deputy Speaker, crime and lawlessness in South Africa is a national emergency. The body count cannot continue to rise. On behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, we join South Africans in pledging our support for the 365 days to end gender-based violence campaign. Enough is enough. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Brett.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. On Monday, 25 November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, we woke up to the start of 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. We woke up to the news that Precious Ramabulana, a student, had been raped and stabbed 52 times. And we also got news that a teenager in Port Alfred was brutally attacked and sexually assaulted. The world has marked this day since the year 2000. This makes it the 20th anniversary. What success has this campaign had in 2 decades, I ask? On 26 November, we learned that a Bloemfontein dad had beaten and strangled his 11-year-old girl child so badly she had to be taken to hospital. I have previously cautioned that we should not make the plight of women and children a hashtag fight. And that, agbare Deputy Speaker, is presies wat ons tans doen. Op dag 3 van hierdie veldtog het die ANC 'n mosie in die NRP verwerp van die 5+ wat by die wreedaardige plaasaanval van 'n boer en op sy vrou, 'n arme weduwee, gelos is. 16 dae van aktivisme is 'n klug. Bettina Wyngaard som dit baie mooi op. Suid-Afrika het die mees progressiewe menseregte wetgewing ter wêreld, maar is die gevaarlikste land vir 'n vrou om tans in te woon in die hele wêreld. Michelle Petersen is donderdagoggend dood nadat 'n betonblok op haar gesig geval het, net sommer hier op 'n N1 hier naby ons. Vrydag, dag 5 van die 16 dae van aktivisme, is Marlene Ferreira op haar plaas buite Jeffreys Bay geskiet. Sy kon gelukkig terugveg, maar die res van die naweek se slagoffers kon nie dieselfde sê nie. Ventersburg, plaaswerker en sy vrou aangeval, vrou verkrag. Motherwell, 15-jarige meisie en haar kerel, is deur 4 mans aangeval. Meisie is in maag geskiet. Beaufort Wes, ma van 4 is doodgesteek toe sy huis toe loop. Derde moord op 'n vrou in die afgelope 5 maande in hierdie dorp. Queenstown, 4-jarige dogtertjie aan badkamerdeur gehang, dood. Hoopstad, Tannie Dirkie, 89, is met 'n hamer oor die kop gemoker toe sy vir haar aanrander koffie gemaak het. Clifton, 'n tweede tiener, is in etlike maande op die strand doodgesteek. Paarden Eiland, vrou op N1 deur 4 mans aangeval en met klippe gestook. En hierdie, agbare adjunkspreker, is net die aanvalle waaroor berig is. En ons is nou nie eers halfpad met 16 dae van aktivisme besig nie. Om 'n vrou in Suid-Afrika te wees, is soos om 'n gladiator in die Romeinse tyd te gewees het. Jy wonder elke dag, gaan jy vandag wen? Gaan ek vandag oorleef? En dan kom môre en jy bekommer van vooraf net weer. Jy leer van kleins af om jou sleutels in jou hand vas te hou as 'n wapen. Jy leer om pepperspray in jou handsak en in jou skooltas te hou. Jy leer om in groepies toilet toe te gaan en dat jou vriendinne jou drankies moet oppas want dit gaan dalk gespike word. Jy leer dat jy by die ingang van 'n winkelsentrum moet parkeer, want om die duister donker hoekies van 'n parkeerarea aan te durf is net te gevaarlik. Maar genoeg, dames en here, is nou werklik waar genoeg. Die polisie, agbare minister, ek het hom gesien, moet hulle sokkies optrek. Rape kits moet in polisiestasies beskikbaar wees. Ons polisiemanne en vroue moet opgelei wees om met ons slagoffers te hanteer. Sexual offence courts need to support the victims, not the offenders. Wetgewing wat jarelang sleur, het nodig om afgehandel te word. The Joint Committee set to deal with GBV and femicide needs to stop being a circus and it needs to start being a proper task force to deal with these problems. Die president se 5-punt plan moet werklik aan die lig kom. Daar is nou genoeg gepraat, ons moet begin doen. Voorsitter, ek dankie.
Honorable Misha.
Deputy Speaker, the ACDP strongly condemns the murder of innocent people in our country, whether they be in their mother's wombs, in their homes, workplaces, or wherever they might be. Even during this 16-day period of activism, there has been a number of cases of violence against women and children. Perpetrators include husbands, uncles, police, priests, teachers, soldiers, and professionals in general. We need to start highlighting the value and central role of the family in our nation, which I believe should be the bedrock of a strong and caring society. Individuals' rights should not negate the fact that we need strong families that will impart values such as respect in every level of society. If men respect women and their value in society, they will not harm or do them wrong, let alone assault or rape them. Equally, if women respect men and boys, they would also not violate them. The ACDP believes that the liberal and humanistic legislation has accelerated the breaking down of family values, and this has resulted in the increase in sexual violence in our country. To help solve this problem, all anti-family laws have to be revisited and repealed where necessary. If we do not do so, the summits and debates about sexual and gender-based violence will continue just as sexual violence also continues. To emphasize the importance of how to successfully fight against gender-based violence, I will repeat some of the things I raised during the President's recent address on gender-based violence a few months ago. Firstly, I believe government will go a long way in restoring the dignity of women by banning all forms of pornography which objectifies women as sex objects. The ACDP has for years said that pornography is the theory, but rape is the act. Secondly, there must be harsher punishment for rape, and rapists must be denied bail. This should help send a strong message that the justice system is serious about rape and is deeply scarring victims, effects on victims. Our toothless justice system must be given stronger teeth so that they can swiftly and effectively deal with cases of rape and sexual violence. Thirdly, victims must be protected from corrupt, immoral police officers who abuse and mistreat them, in some instances, assault and rape them when they go to report cases of rape. These officers must be purged from our police service and face the full might of the law. The ACDP says the victimizing of victims of rape and sexual violence must stop.
Thank you, Mruti. If you're dealing on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Kwankwa.
Deputy Speaker and honorable members, Honorable Mrwetyana is quite correct in highlighting or repeating the words which were uttered by President Ramaphosa recently, where he said the crisis of gender-based violence against women and children is a shame on the nation. Once a year, we shine the spotlight on gender-based violence, and this House debates the matter, but we seem to be not going anywhere or making no progress in eradicating this scourge from our society. Colleagues, you know that in both rural areas and cities, gender-based violence occurs in public places. In some of the instances, especially in rural areas, it even occurs in public transport. Anecdotal evidence suggests that in the past year, we have seen violence against women and children escalate, and we must acknowledge the role that the media has played in highlighting this devastating phenomenon. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a tendency among some men in South Africa to blame victims for the violence. I would like to make it categorically clear on behalf of the UDM that our women and children cannot be held responsible for the violence that happens to them. Violence is the responsibility of the perpetrators, and we as lawmakers must make sure that those who perpetrate violence against women and children face the full might of the law. Honorable members, the United Democratic Movement started asking an important question a while ago. The question is, what is the use of having a women's department if that department seems to be doing very little to nothing about the challenges of gender-based violence? This department, to us, is failing in its program of social transformation and economic empowerment. Policy, stakeholder coordination, and knowledge management, even though useful, is not what we need to address the current crisis. The department has no teeth, and issuing statement after gender-based violence has occurred is not useful. The UDM sees this department playing a greater role in coordinating government's efforts to definitively remove gender-based violence from our lives. And this can be done in coordination and in cooperation with other structures of society. A point that we feel is often overlooked is that as a society that lives in the digital era, we have to do something about the rising levels of gender-based violence that take place in online spaces, with little girls and young women and children regularly reporting harassment and abuse on these platforms that go unpunished and usually go unnoticed, to the point where they have to exercise self-censure. Siyabulela si UDM, say class, goes.
Honorable Mahau.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Karabo Mukwena, Vesha Kandasamy, Jordan Peters, Uyinene Mrwetyana, and many more others. And more recently, Precious Ramabulana, remember their names, honorable members. On the 3rd of September, the African Transformation Movement wrote to the President pleading that the President exercises his power in terms of Section 84, subsection 2G, to allow for a referendum for the amendment of the Constitution to allow for the introduction of a justice-based capital punishment system, better known as the death penalty. This retribution is required to bring proper closure to the families of the victims. A request which fell short of acknowledgement, yet it echoes the wants of millions of South African women and families who are tired of hearing expressions such as, I quote, "The President is shocked, the President is concerned, and most recently, enough is enough." When will the President stop with this populist platitude and start protecting the women of South Africa and their children through allowing for this much needed referendum? Mr. President, Until when should innocent victims like Precious Khamabulanas, Uyinene Mrwetyana, and others perish at the hands of merciless, repeat serial rapists and murderers under your watch? Until when you are going to tolerate this unnecessary loss of lives while defending this perpetrator-centric constitution and justice system? Today, Mr. President, we demand that you listen to the masses, including your own ANC Women's League, and the cries of the people who elected all of us to represent them in this House and accede to the referendum. We present them, Mr. President, not only the fortunate 1% that have access to 24-hour private security. We are tired of academic aerobics about whether death penalty reduces crime or not, whilst our women and children are dying and raped by the hour. On the 9th October, the African Transformation Movement Women's League sent a letter to the President where we asked for a referendum to amend the Constitution. Perhaps the letter we sent got lost in the mail. We will resend this letter. Given the imperfections in our justice system, the capital punishment called for must be accompanied by these safeguards. We are saying applicable only to repeat offenders. If convicted, the automatic appeal to a full bench at Supreme Court must kick in. The accused must be represented by a senior counsel. If the accused is indigent, the state must carry the legal cost. The time for a victim-centric constitution and justice system is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Deputy Chairperson.
Deputy Speaker.
Oh, my
Yes.
apology. Honorable Deputy Speaker, I was really hoping today.
Point of order, Chairperson.
What's the point of order? Yes.
Chairperson, angazi noma
Usomuphi chairperson?
Deputy Speaker.
Yebo.
Angazi noma umbonile uMinister lapha. He's been standing there for a while and it's happening in front of your eyes. And we are dealing with a matter that is very serious.
Uthetha ngantoni manje? Oh, yeah. Honorable member, please be present with us. You don't seem to be with us. You are somewhere else altogether. Go ahead, Minister.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I was really hoping today that as we near the end of the 16 days of violence against women and children, I was going to hear more contributions about actions and what all of us must do together. I want to share with you, Deputy Speaker, that yesterday we assisted the women's shelter movement across the country by hosting a golf day. And I want to say thank you to all the men that came out and contributed more than 250,000 towards women's shelters. Because that people are ready to come together. We must unite against this scourge. I had the honor to play with 2 young boys because we must also teach our young boys and entrench a culture of respect for women. A young boy, 9-year-old Trey from Cape Town, who's fast becoming a national golf prodigy. And here's his message to women and gender-based violence, and he said, I quote, "I believe that women are the key to the future. My mom works so hard to ensure that I get the tools I need to develop my talent. And I hope that women in South Africa will be protected." We were also honored to have 8-year-old Simtandile Simtaiga Shabalala. And he's also representing South Africa in multiple international tournaments. And he said he loves his mom because as his mom is always so sweet, and he doesn't know why women and children are being abused. I hope that these 2 young boys can grow up one day to be like men around, as role models around the country. Because key to national unity is the protecting of women and girls. Men and boys should be partners with women to build families and our country and not abuse women and children. Yes, we hear a lot about statistics today. Statistics is important, but we can repeat them, but we have to build a South Africa where our women feel safe, safe in their homes, safe in churches. And my message to women too is that pain is not normal. If you have pain, you must walk away from an abusive relationship and go to a women's shelter. We must also distribute that call center number. I called it last week, Saturday, and it was answered within 8 seconds. And all of us must distribute that number so that women can know there is help for them out there. So that toll-free number is very helpful, but now the time has come that if we claim that this government is useless to deal with gender-based violence, then why can we leave then gender-based violence only to government to sort out? We all have got a responsibility, and stop complaining. We need to see action from all of us, not only government. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh, Imam, how can you be sitting there?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Yes, indeed, once again, and I think I've been doing this for the 5th year in succession, coming here to talk about the issue of gender-based violence. It is common knowledge that in this country, the extent of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa renders it a national crisis. Despite the announcement by the President that gender-based violence will be prioritized and measures will be put in place with the pledge of 1.6 billion, and we must be mindful of the fact that it is not only money that is going to solve the problems of gender-based violence. In fact, let me say this, that it starts in our very homes. It starts in this house. How many of us, particularly male members of Parliament in this house, can honestly and sincerely say that we treat every woman equally? I think I would be shocked and surprised if you did some research into it and you would find that it is clearly not the case. Women are also emotionally abused, and let me tell you, when you are a member of Parliament, it is accepted that when you are a member of Parliament, that you are superior to the extent, how many of the men in this house can tell me that you are honest and sincere to the wives that you leave behind in the homes that you live in the rural areas? Very, very few of you can tell me. How many of you can tell me that you sincerely and honestly protect and love your children and pay maintenance to your children? Many of you don't even do that. So let us take account of our action and our behavior, and that is why we have such a line. Let me also commend Botswana for recently having, and I think it is early as yesterday, for the death penalty on one of the crimes that was committed where somebody murdered their boss. And that is what South Africa needs. Or more importantly, let me tell you what we need. We need Sharia law in South Africa. Chop off the fingers. Chop off the fingers if you cannot deal with the issue. Yes, many of these people are not going to accept it, and can I tell you why? They will not accept it because if you had to have Sharia law for some of the crimes, some of them will be fingerless. That is basically what will happen, and that is the reason why they will not accept it. But let me, let me add, and let me give you a good example why I say it's not only money.
If you want to keep your fingers.
Let me give you the example. Let me give you an example why I say it's not only money. Let's take the issue of a woman by the name of Melanie Carroll, and I'm not going to give you her surname for obvious reasons. The woman is battered and abused for 17 years by a policeman husband. The police was not able to help. The court releases him on bail last week. The woman is frantic. She's fearing her life. The children are traumatized. The police can do very little or nothing about it. So it is the criminal justice system that also must be dealt with. It's not only about finances can bring about the change in terms of the way we behave on gender-based violence.
Honourable member, your time is expired. Honourable Noble.
Sekela somlomo ohloniphekileyo. malunga alendlu ahloniphekileyo. Akusona isimo esamukelekile ukuthi unyaka nonyaka eNingizimu Afrika siba nomkhankaso esibiza ngokuthi 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. Kodwa ekubeni abantu besifazane kanye nezingane beqhubeka behlukunyezwa mihla namalanga. Izigameko esizibonayo zokuhlukunyezwa kwabantu besifazane nezingane zisikhombisa ukuthi akumele sibe nje no 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. Kepha kumele sibe nomkhankaso wa 365 days of activism for no violence against women and children. Iqiniso ukuthi abantu besifazane eNingizimu Afrika kanye nezingane abavikelekile. Ngisho besemakhaya abo bayahlukunyezwa. Noma besendaweni abasebenzela kuzo bayahlukunyezwa. Nanoma sebeya ezikhungweni zikahulumeni njengase post office bafike bahlukunyezwa. Kuliqiniso lemsulo ukuthi ukuvikelwa kwabantwana eNingizimu Afrika inselelo yawo wonke umuntu. Kodwa naye uhulumeni kumele abe nendima enkulu ayidlalayo ukuze aqinisekise ukuthi abantwana bavikeleka futhi bayathuthukiswa. Sekela somlomo. Kuyamangaza ukuthi umnyango wokuthuthukiswa komphakathi ukhombisa ukuthi uyahluleka ukulwisana nezinkinga ezibhekene ne-foster care system. Kunombiko oveza ukuthi imiyalelo yenkantolo noma ama-court orders angama-thousands and thousands awazange alandele umnyango wezokuthuthukiswa komphakathi. Le miyalelo noma lama court orders aqinisekisa ukuthi umnyango uvikela abantwana abasuke behlukumezekile. Lokho kusho ukuthi umnyango awazi noma labo bantwana abahlukumezekile isimo sabo sesishintshile yini noma basahlukunyezwa. Inhloso nqangi ye-foster care system ukweseka kanye nokuvikela abantwana abahlukumezekile. Kodwa ngaphandle kwemiyalelo yenkantolo osonhlala kahle abakwazi ukuqinisekisa ukuthi abantwana bavikeleka. Okunye futhi okwethusayo ukuthi ngaphandle kwalama court orders abantu abanekela izingane ngaphasi kwe-foster care system abakwazi ukuthola isibonelelo i-foster care grant. Lokhu kwenza ukuthi izinkulungwane zabantu abanekela izingane ezihlukumezekile bangabi nawo amandla okwenza lokho njengoba beshodelwa izimali. Lesi isimo engamele sisivume futhi singamukelekile. Kumele umnyango wezokuthuthukiswa komphakathi ulisukumele lolu daba lama court orders mayelana ne-foster care eNingizimu Afrika. Ukuxazulula izinkinga ezikhungethe i-foster care kuzosiza kakhulu ekuvikeleni abantwana abahlukumezekile. Kuzophinde futhi kwenze umsebenzi ube lula kosonhlala kahle abasebenza ngokukhulu ukuzikhandla mihla namalanga eqinisekiseni ukuthi izingane ziyavikeleka. I-DA ngeke ithule isonge izandla imbokodo kanye nezingane behlukumezeka. Sizoqhubeka nokuba izwe elikhulumela abantu besifazane kanye nezingane. Sizoqhubeka nokuqinisekisa ukuthi lo hulumeni uthatha izinyathelo ezifanele ukuqinisekisa ukuthi lesi sihlava siyaphela. Alikho ilizwe lingaphumelela ngaphandle kokuvikela abantu besifazane kanye nezingane njengoba sisho nesizulu sithi inkunzi isematholeni okusho ukuthi ikusasa lisezandleni lentsha. Ngiyabonga.
Honorable Malachi.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, greetings, honorable members. I address all of you here as a brother, a leader. Honorable Speaker, allow me to be in the foreground to input a debate that it is very important that we quote the most important charter of women, the 1954 charter that said, "We women of South Africa, wives, mothers, working women, housewives, Africans, Indians, and coloreds, hereby declare our aim of striving for the removal of all laws, regulations, conversations, costumes that discriminate against us as women, that deprive us at any way to inherit the right of advantage and responsibility and opportunities to offer of any sections of the populations." It cannot be correct that 65 years later, since the adoption of the Women's Charter, that women are still fighting against costumes and cultures and practices that discriminate against women. The revival of traditions and cultures and costumes and the practice that derive from them after the demise of colonization, imperialism, apartheid, will definitely require us to enter into a dialogue that characterizes our ancestors and what really it is that is indigenous. However, the process should take the context into consideration that some of the cultural practices were necessary then and necessary now due to development, globalization, and other factors. Some cultural practices that needs to be scrutinized, such as the practice of virginity testing. Women are expected to maintain a high level of morality to be married to an honorable man who might be deflowered as in impregnating a lot of women and also possibly having HIV positive. On the other hand, virginity testing poses a threat of discrimination against girl children who are not virgins, who in many instances are raped by men. The reason to advance the virginity testing, it is not focused on prevention and protection. The practice of ukutwala is a form of adoption that involves the kidnapping of young girls and women by a man and his friends and peers with an intention to compelling the young girls or young women firstly to endorse a marriage or their families to endorse negotiations. There is a proven link between education, underdevelopment, and poverty. Ukutwala deprives girls, children opportunities to educate, develop themselves. Furthermore, the research indicates that majority of young women who are victims from ukutwala are from poor families. The lack of education and underdevelopment due to ukutwala deepens the poverty and the cycle of poverty in society. A gender-based activist and advocate of High Court, MJ Maluleka, emphasizes the following, that honorable members, during the survival of traditions and culture and costumes, it must be part of a new nation and international identity. However, this revival must be rooted in a way that is based on human rights, democracy, equality for all, understood from the point of view of Ubuntu. Culture and traditional costumes must have a balance within society and the legal context of the Constitution and provision of the Bill of Rights. In the same breath, we must address patriarchy in society. Patriarchy remains the deepest entrenched within the fabric of society to such an extent that most women consider it as being normal, a normal way of life. This must be changed. Steve Biko once said, I quote, "Women must be at the forefront of nation building to bring South African citizens together. Therefore, develop a whole new ethos of human coexistence. Women have shaken off the shackles of the past in a determined struggle against political, socio-economic oppression, have decisively earned themselves a place in the history books of our country. The nation honor women like Mama Winnie Mandela, Mama Sisulu, Tambo, and many others. The sad reality, however, is that today the shackles remains different from the past. The recent killings of women in the country bears testimony of the chains that bind them to find expression in patriarchal society. We need to work as a collective to address patriarchy that is in line with the following incident that has happened in the past weeks. The hand-hiking of trips from a job interview in Johannesburg turned to a tragedy where two young people from Mpumalanga, one was painfully killed and raped by men, while the other one, who's disabled, was thrown out of a moving car. A 22-year-old Sebokeng Gauteng man alleged stabbed his mother and 4-year-old sister to death. Right here in South Africa. In the University of KwaZulu-Natal, we heard about the murder of a dean of art, who was killed allegedly for refusing to approve a dissertation which did not meet the requirement. In Limpopo, we see yet another young bright lady who was in fact a breadwinner who supported a family using the NEFSA's grants monthly stipend, Precious Ramabulan, who was brutally killed. In all these incidents are as a result of patriarchy. They are happening right in our country, in our homes, our schools, our workplaces, not far from many of us where we reside. Therefore, it should not be the duty of, it should be a duty of every member here today, both on this platform, that we become vocal about this gender-based violence. These are serious matters that should not be used for cheap politicking. We should work towards strengthening our police systems. We should work towards developing policies that make sure that enforce law implementation agencies to capacitate our police. 16 days of activism must not be the only time when we fight against these ills in society. We must work together to assist each other to build this nation. Honorable members, women do not wish to form a society separate from the one of men. In their belief, there is one society, and it is made up of women and children. Speaker, women share with the men folks the scars of inequalities and poverty, which are evil. Together, we can defeat poverty. Together, we can defeat unemployment. Together, we can defeat inequalities. Together, we can defeat gender-based violence. Together, we can defeat homicides. Last but not least, the matter of dealing with teaching society about respect, consent, human rights, and women must be extended to public servants. It must not be that women still feel unsafe, even in public spaces where they should feel safe. But I'll close by saying, and quoting what Mama Uyinene once said, that overwhelmingly majority of women accept patriarchy unquestionably and even protected, working out of the resultant of frustration, not against men, but against themselves, in their competition for men as sons, lovers, husbands. Traditionally, violated wife beat out or take out their frustrations on their daughter-in-laws. So men dominate women through the agency of other women. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Nchaisa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Deputy Speaker. As we mark the 16 days of activism against violence of women and children, we must begin...
Order, honorable members, order, keep your voices low, please.
...for the first time to expose and name and shame these culprits. These are the culprits that have been convicted, sentenced, and charged for crimes perpetrated against women and children. The culprits in the likes of Luyanda Bota, Anonymous Mate, may the soul of this culprit rest in hell. Tulani Ngobo, Bulelani Manyaga, and many others. These culprits have got no place in our society. Deputy Speaker, we are greatly concerned that the contents of the National Register of Sex Offenders cannot be made available to the general public. It is only those who have been granted a clearance certificate that can have access to the contents of this register. This is a great concern indeed. The risk of these over-regulations may not be in the best interest of our efforts to stem out child-related sexual offenses. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we are alarmed by the Judge K. Podlani's judgment in child-related criminal cases. Her judgment in these recent years on child-related cases have been very, very lenient. This is an affront to the fight against the child abuse and violence. Deputy Speaker, as we mark the 16 days of this 16 days campaign, we need to reflect deeply on the boy child. There must be concerted effort to mold young men of ethical and moral conduct. This must be a collective effort between the government, traditional leaders, civil society, and the schools. Of course, it cannot be the government alone. Let us not destroy our future by killing our children and women. Patriarchy, Deputy Speaker, is one issue that should be looked into. No one should be seen as above one another. Deputy Speaker, unemployment, poverty, and inequality cannot be regarded as an excuse for abuse of women and children. Of course, Deputy Speaker, it is not in our culture as Black Africans to abuse women and children. Let us go back to our basics. We think, Deputy Speaker, that education, social development, police, justice, and correctional services should come together and fight against this scourge so that our children and women should no longer suffer. We support the idea that now this should be continued for 365 days, not only 16 days. This should be taken as a reminder that we should work or fight against women abuse and children. Thank you very much.
Honorable Member, as you go away, please in future, no matter how angry you are, always temper your language. especially when speaking in the House and elsewhere. It helps to cool tempers generally. Honorable Madisha, it's your turn.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. I too, on behalf of COPE, rise to say, let's respect women. All human beings are the same. All human beings are a product of the same process, the process which results in all human beings taking their first breath and their last breath. All human beings have the same physical and body organs, which without must make all humanity to conclude that all people, whether men or women, are the same and must therefore enjoy the same access to all that which is positive. The only difference between men and women is one organ, without which presence more humans will not have their first breath. It is unfortunate that South Africans, including this House, only rise to commit ourselves to gender equality and the removal of gender violence when problems arise, like what has happened in Limpopo and is continuing to happen in a number of other areas. After these 16 days, government will forget until we go to elections, because although government here rises to say, respect women, it is a fact that they use women as a tool to acquire votes. Jobs for women are created, but which set of women? I want to ask that a question. Not the poor, but those who are already in high positions. If we come here to Parliament, for example, it is said that women that we have here, it must be, for example, 50%, 50%. Now, these are people who already are up there, who enjoy whatever they are enjoying. But then the ordinary people out there, the poor people, are not enjoying this. MPs are being made ministers, and that is a very serious problem. Now, even beyond the realms of this parliament, who are the women who are being enriched? Those are those women who are already there up front, who are rich already. And when they talk about giving people more resources, women more resources, it is already those who have resources that are given more resources. But then if you go to KZN, if you go to all over,
Madisha,
the ordinary people
don't go to
have.
KZN, your time is expired. Oh. Your time is expired, sir.
Go.
Thank you. Honorable Nyonso.
Deputy Speaker, South Africa is an extremely violent society. Criminals opportunistically aim at the soft targets that the state should protect with all means necessary at its disposal. The soft targets are defenseless women, children, and especially the elderly. I want to illustrate this point by telling you of the case of Mama Mandisa Tsotsi. At 77, she is a retired nurse, a former placarder, a military veteran, a lawyer, a community worker, and an activist for the rights of women, a grandmother, a parent, and more than anything else, a patriot. She comes from a political family. Her father, her brother, herself were in exile. She was sexually attacked by what could be a youngster from the neighborhood in rural Tsomo in the Eastern Cape. The rural areas are no longer a safe haven for the elderly. The scourge of gender-based violence has spread throughout the country. Mama Tsotsi was raided at night and held at knife point, then assaulted, I know the case as I went to Tsomo Police Station in my duties as an MP serving my constituency to inquire on the investigation, and nothing has happened since then. The crime happened in August 2019, and the matter is still treated as a cold case. This is a further assault on the assaulted, done by negligent investigators. She is still to date receiving a treatment in a military hospital in Pretoria. As the PAC, we continue to hail our loud call for the judicial system to be transformed. And key among other changes is how do we decisively deal with perpetrators of these inhuman atrocities. One of the key reasons why we will continue to have this problem is when the law and judicial system is seen to be weak. Perpetrators are arrested for a few days and then later be released either on bail or through means and reasons that are never clearly explained. We call on this House to prioritize this matter, and as lawmakers, let us lead the charge in the fight against these violent crimes. Let us lead the charge by changing laws and put in place laws that will send a clearly audible message to all that this behavior is against our African norm, morals, and value system. As African people, we praise ourselves with our high levels of moral standing on earth, and we must do everything in our power to remain as such. What type of a nation are we if we to fold our arms and watch war being waged against our loved ones? Let us rise as a society, roll our sleeves, and give the perpetrators a well-deserved response. I thank you.
Thank you. Al-Jamaa, Honorable Hendrickson.
Deputy Speaker, I need my fingers so I will be good to women. The 16 days of activism against violence on women and children, this campaign, Deputy Speaker, with the deepest respect, serves as a smokescreen for state institutions such as SAP's Social Welfare Department and the judicial system for failing to protect women and children. In a news article of the Cape Argus this morning, the Western Cape High Court granted parole to a gang member who is serving 10 years for a gang rape committed in 2014. The Chief Justice must please explain and why there is a war against women by our judiciary. With judges like that on the bench, there is no hope for the 16 days campaign. Does the Chief Justice not conscientize his judges? This is a question that Al-Jamaa asks. Al-Jamaa has started a gender strengthening mechanism desk at its National Constituency Office in Surrey Estate, Athlone, to assist physically abused women with legal, social and welfare matters, and has put in place an armed response unit to fetch women as their husbands abuse them and take them to the police station. Deputy Speaker, as part of my constituency work, I chaired a disciplinary hearing at a primary school yesterday in one of the poorest areas in the Cape Flats. And I found the educator guilty and sent the minutes and the report to the Chief Auxiliary Social Worker, the Department of Basic Education, and the MJC as they inquired about this case. And this is what the evidence that the boys, 10 boys and 1 girl gave at the hearing. My teacher tried to cut my penis with the scissors. He would hit us in our private parts with his hands and sometimes with a ruler. He's asked us to lift our arms and punish us until we are, and pinch us until we are blue. When we stretch our arms and legs apart, he proceeds to punch me in my private areas. We as parents, and the parent rights, we as parents appreciate your discretion in this matter as our son is extremely embarrassed. A grade 7 girl gave evidence the teacher hit me with his elbow against my breast, which hurt. He winks at me, hits me on my head. My classmate says he's really close with me and she is always around him. He smiled at me with weird looks, which is totally uncomfortable. He often forces me to bring things like food, else my whole class is going to squat. Deputy Speaker, we heard your press conference about this morning. We hope it's not going to be all thunder and no lightning.
Honorable Mpiti.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Jackson Katz makes a significant point on the framing of gender-based violence. He argues that calling gender-based violence a woman's issue is part of the problem because it gives men an excuse not to pay attention. Using this framing, you can see how this has systematically worked in our society. For example, when people hear the word gender, many times they think it's about women issues, as if men don't have a gender. This is one of the ways in which a dominant system maintains itself, the ability to go unexamined about issues that are about us as men. Martin Luther King once said, "In the end, what will hurt the most is not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." So today, as men in this house, we need to ask ourselves, what have we done to organize around gender-based violence? What have we done to lead other men in society on gender-based violence? The truth is, the responsibility to take up leadership on this issue must fall on adult men, and men who are in power in particular. We know so much about how to prevent domestic and sexual violence. There is no excuse that our institutions, our workplaces, our schools, and our public spaces are not doing it. The reason is adult men and adult men with power in these spaces are deliberately not taking leadership on this matter. It's about the vice chancellor in a university who has the power to decide how resources are allocated. It's about the male school teacher in a classroom who intentionally takes steps to disrupt the toxic masculinity in the classroom. It's about the father at home who sits down with his kids and unpacks the importance of being able to deal with your feelings as a young boy. It's about a coach who corrects sexist remarks in a team and sets a clear example that it will not be tolerated. The point is simple. It is about the people in charge, the people who decide what the priorities become, the people who control the resources, the adult men in their homes, the adult men in the workspaces, the adult men in the public spaces. The point is, it's about the people in charge. The president promised and made a promise here on the 5th of September to say he will provide rapid and comprehensive responses to all forms of violence. What has happened? Nothing. To address the backlog of cases, the delay in DNA testing, and the availability of rape kits, nothing. That all crimes against women and children should attract harsher minimum sentences, nothing has happened. There are a few hard truths that we need to deal with in order to start changing the course of gender-based violence. The Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities has failed. The minister has failed. She must resign. Either we make a fundamental change and allocate the resources to the Commission of Gender of Equality so that the real work can begin on the ground. The truth of the matter is, NGOs are doing the Lord's work in the devil's playground. It is NGOs in many instances that pick up the slack of government in dealing with gender-based violence in our communities. They tend to lack funding, so do something about that. Lastly, there are men who care deeply about these issues, but caring deeply is not enough. We need more guts. We need to challenge each other. We need to disrupt each other and begin to change the level of tragedy in our society. And in closing, Speaker, there's a man here who disrespected a female colleague of mine. It's unacceptable. And you guys need to change, because if we are saying men must take up responsibility, it must start with us.
Remember, be careful of your gesturing. Honorable the Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability.
Deputy Speaker, honorable members, ministers, I just want to take this opportunity really to invite all of us to reflect deeply and fairly on the memory of all those whom we have lost through gender-based violence and femicide. Sometimes it's easier to reflect on the names that have been flagged and championed all over, especially by members of the media. But we know our people have died in numbers in the most remote rural areas, and very little is known by them. But I will not risk the temptation, Honorable Deputy Speaker, to reflect a little bit on some of what Honorable Ngobo was saying, that there is a need to call for 365 days of activism. And really, really, Honorable Ngobo, when he says that, Deputy Speaker, kuyadabula, kuzisa ubuhlungu, ngoba ngempela sonke sikulendlu, kodwa cishe asizwa ngokufanayo. Ngithatha ukuthi sokuphele iminyaka emihlanu iSouth Africa yathi asizu hlala nje kulezi insuku eziyishumi nesithupha, kodwa kufanele sikhankase izinsuku eziwu-365 days round the clock. Manje kuyethusa uma uthola i-honorable member engakakutholi kahle lokho, esazoma phambi kweParliamente ibe kuthi cha sicela kube ne-365 days. Enye into encane nje kuyi-honorable members ngisababonga abakhulumile, kuyathanda futhi ukukhathaza umoya mawuzwa u-honorable Sharif ekhuluma ngokuthi uhulumende ayikho into aseyenzile. Kuba nzima ukuthola ukuthi kuyipolitika noma ukungatholi kahle izinto ukuthi imihla ngemihla senzani. The President of the Republic of South Africa led a high-level discussion in September. I will refer briefly to what Honorable Mrwetyana was saying. Basically, the President made a clarion call using his highest authority you can ever think of. And we have seen the response from top multinational companies in this country launching their own 16 days of activism. I personally went where Anglo-Americans said globally, worldwide, we're stamping our authority to say no violence against women and children. So, uma kukhona imember la ezingakatholi kahle ukuthi umongameli uthini usisaphi kuyethusa kakhulu ngoba phela sishaya imithetho sizinkokheli simele amaqembu okumele ngabe akhankasa ubusuku nemini phansi. So really our emphasis today ukuthi there are still men abasabambekile abasaqhubeka nalento. Kodwa thina kudala sibekile indaba yokuthi #women and children abusers must fall. From the time when umongameli athi ngizohosta mina i-summit ezokhomba indlela, that was basically the message you were sending. But also, honorable members, it's fallacy to think that the president can mobilize up to 1.6 billion and say, oh, just because it came from existing funds, it's no money. It's a budget which is meant to strengthen the machinery. And also when you talk, what is this department doing? It's part of the national gender machinery that is working 365 days. Is the Women's Ministry, is the Commission for Gender Equality, gender focal points at all levels. So e-government machinery is hard at work, dealing with a complex phenomenon. The government machinery is being led by able, capable face which is giving this process the moral and political authority. Yes, we are dealing with the complex issues. We've had shocking issues, shocking news, while we're saying at long last we're on top of the agenda. But we shouldn't be deterred nor intimidated. The president has made it clear, even when we came to address the launch of the 16 days of activism. He challenged us, as Honorable Mrwetyana was saying, to rethink about who we are, our own identity, African identity, and to re-examine our attitudes, our beliefs in terms of gender equality. And that's a powerful thing because it's taking this struggle beyond saying the government, but looking at us as people who make what is South Africa. Is South Africa yimnawe? Is South Africa yiqembu lami nelakho? Is South Africa umuntu wonke osemasontweni osemakhaya okuphi nakuphi? Umongameli have said masenze lokho which will make us proudly South African. Sihloniphane senze lokho okuyi constitution yethu. Prevention is a very, very important component of the work that we are facing. The preventive measures against gender-based violence, they really have to go back to what Tata Madiba had spoken about, the RDP of the soul, the RDP of the mind. We should rethink, we should re-challenge our own attitudes towards especially girls and women, because that's where it all begins. When you think less of another person, that's where it begins to end up not realizing their rights that are protected in the victim's charter, but end up abusing them in one way or another. Also, another important thing that we have to look at, when we talk about the mechanisms that we should embark upon, it's important to locate what we're talking about within our context of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The women that we're talking about, the girls that we're talking about, are the people who bear the brunt of the problem, but also who are far from the resources. But thanks to the government, who have seen it strategic to expand the sexual offences court to the most remote rural areas, the Minister of Justice, who have made sure that they are amended appropriately, the Tutuzela centers. We still have challenges in some instances where they are not adequately mended, but at least there's a clear thinking that those Tutuzela centers are dealing with trauma and its impact on a person's mind. And so we are not where we were yesterday. I want to assure you, honorable members, that our old victim empowerment program, almost all civil society organizations, especially those that are funded by government, are working hard day and night to make sure that from the police to the judge, nobody is gonna try and cancel victims. But this empowerment is meant to ensure that each and every victim will fight till the last for justice. Where they've disappeared, where they've been killed, what has been consoling is to see families standing up, forming foundations and fighting back, not only for those their loved ones who have died, but for all younger women and girls who are faced with this challenge in society. Secondly, we have to continue looking at the role of the police. Of course, we all know that our police are not adequately staffed, they are not adequately funded. But there are positive things that I am happy to talk about. When we were presented that all our police stations have been given the rape kits, I felt that it's up to us, especially civil society, the community development fora, the community structures are critical if we're to prevent this scourge from occurring, because they have an opportunity to scan and analyze who are potential perpetrators, what can be done timelessly before they attack, and make sure that they prevent the act, not to react afterwards. So we are the ones who must support our police today. We are the ones who must make them accountable through our community development fora. We are the ones who must shout if we feel that our local police stations don't have adequate vehicles, they don't have measures to communicate, and whatever they might require for them to interview women in a decent manner. When it comes to prosecution, it's a major challenge when you hear that many cases have been dropped because no evidence could be accumulated. But like the police, it's up to us to support the Tutuzela centers at a local level to ensure that our files, they have all the important material which will compel the prosecuting authority to do its work timelessly, to do its work efficiently, to do its work in a way which will restore the dignity of women who would have been dehumanized through sexual assault and many of the crimes that they go through. And when it comes to our legal profession, it's also important to bring our own activism. The easiest thing is to represent the perpetrator and to create doubt in a court and to confuse the victim and to ensure that the perpetrator goes scot-free. But we are of African pride. We are South African citizens. We are all bound to fight for victims of this crime. Because as long as we don't fight adequately for them, we cannot hope that miracle will happen and perpetrators will just be intimidated. So we all have a responsibility to play our part and to ensure that anyone who is in a court of law, they don't have this burden of remembering, this burden of having a clear memory of what happened on that day, of what the perpetrator was wearing, of what the man said, did he agree, didn't agree. What has been more offensive to women is that normally in a security system, women are advised, and all citizens, that if you are confronted by armed criminals, you have to find a way of cooperating, because if you scream or you act in a way where they think you are going to attack, you'll be killed. But when it comes to women who are victims of this crime, half the time in our courts, they will be looking at whether there are scratches and then beginning to wonder as to why didn't they fight back. I mean, there are decided cases where there's been clearly an analysis whereby perpetrators were given lighter sentences. And that is a big problem. It doesn't help us to ensure that we meet our targets in terms of stopping this scourge of violence against women and children. I'm not going to go into details into those, but I would say those are some of the things which the president was talking about during the 16 days, that we have to examine our own origins and identity as to who we are and do all what will make us to be a proud people. But also, we have to guard against allowing our officials within the criminal justice system all to want to be counselors and begin to channel the victim's mind, calming them down and leading to positions where sometimes they withdraw cases. The officers of the law throughout the value chain, they are meant to deal harshly with perpetrators. And I was a little bit concerned here when I heard that since the summit, nothing has happened. But I must say, if we're to be fair and truthful, there have been heavy sentences that have been passed. And also, there are many people who have not been granted a bail, as coming from a history where it was almost a routine. In the townships, in the informal settlements, we're all familiar with cases. I hope honorable members have constituencies in those communities where people were saying, yesterday, this young man raped a girl here, went to the police station, but after 2 days, we saw him back, threatening all of us. But today, I think since the implementation of this 5-action plan, there have been a clear message sent across that this is a serious crime. This is not the kind of crime where people can easily apply for bails. And we are beginning to see the fruit of the campaign. Honorable Deputy Speaker, at this point in time, I want to thank you very much for giving us an opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honorable Minister. I appreciate that. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. The Secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of third report of National Assembly Rules Committee.
Honorable Doris Dlakude, the Deputy Chief Whip of the Majority Party, as a member of the committee, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members. Good afternoon. In accordance with the Constitution, the National Assembly is empowered to determine its own procedures in working arrangements. The rules and orders of the rules and orders of the House. Of course, Parliament and the political environment are not static, but constantly evolve. And the rules must be understood as living articles. Recently, the Rules Committee has been seized with reforms in order to improve the functioning of the House. In particular, it has been examining the mechanisms of member statements and the procedures to remove office bearers in institutions supporting constitutional democracy. The Rules Committee tabled a report on these matters, which included a number of recommendations on the 28th of November 2018.